So just to make sure that you guys will understand the program, this program was created for us to be able to help founders that are in different stages of building their company. And during this week, we're going to be talking about product market fit. Each one of the sessions is a standalone session. If you have not seen the ones before, no problem. If you cannot, unfortunately, participate on the future events, no problem. We will be creating and editing these sessions later and posting them on the YouTube.
Without further ado, I think we've got a lot of interesting topics to discuss today, and it's a pleasure to be able to be reunited again with an old roommate and a internet friend that I don't think I've actually ever met in real life, but feels like we've been speaking for so long on crypto Twitter, or sorry, I guess it's called Crypto X now. Is it CX? I don't know. But it's good to see both Tristans here today, as well as thanks again for all the organizers, Jay, Steven, Luke, and the rest of the gang here. I think we would love to have maybe both Tristans maybe do a little bit of a self intro. But I think at a high level, one of the things that I think we've been really blessed with on this entire series is to have a lot of very experienced builders that have been through the thicks and thins of all crypto's ups and downs. And I think the perspectives that you gain from maybe not having the easiest road is probably one of the most valuable types of experiences that for me I'm looking forward to today as well. So I would love maybe first Backpack Tristan to maybe give a quick intro.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me here. It's great to participate in this. I love when folks put things together that can help new companies figure out how they can get to market. So this is a really great effort that you guys put together here. My name is Tristan. I'm the co-founder of Backpack and Mad Lads. A bit of backstory. I joined the industry initially at the FTX cryptocurrency exchange in early 2022. My co-founder Armani invited me to join him as a co-founder with Backpack. At the time, we hadn't come up with Mad Lads. It was just a non-custodial wallet that had these decentralized applications called XNFTs. And we pretty quickly realized that we needed to have culture, we needed to have community, and we needed to have a representation of what an XNFT collectible looked like. So that was the birth of Mad Lads, which I'm sure many more people are actually aware of Mad Lads now than Backpacks. That's something we're working on shifting. But yeah, it's been quite an adventure. I've been working actively in the Solana ecosystem for 3 years now, which is crazy. Time is flying, and great to be here on the panel with you guys.
Thanks, Tristan. Over to the second, but not least, Tristan from Zeta.
Thanks. So I'm Tristan, other Tristan. I'm the co-founder of Zeta Markets, and we're the leading perps exchange on Solana. I've been in crypto for, like 5 or 6 years at this point, which feels pretty crazy to say. I started off in 2017, very humble beginnings, just met a friend through like a Facebook crypto investing group. He kind of sent me a few $100 worth of shit coins essentially. And then I started trading those on like Bittrex and Bitfinex back in the day. So that got me cut my teeth on crypto. And that got me really curious. I took a bunch of kind of senior year electives in my CS courses, did proof of work blockchain building and stuff like that, which was pretty fun. And I'm like, hey, there's actually something of substance here. I went and kind of pivoted, worked in big tech for a couple of years, doing kind of more AI research, data science stuff. And then I think through COVID, I got really burnt out from that. And I was like, I want to get back into startups, and crypto was starting to pop off again. And I was reading all this stuff about smart contracts and getting really interesting. And so funnily enough, we kind of started looking into Solana start of 2021 when there was really nothing built there other than maybe like Serum and Radium. It was like pretty barren, I would say. That's actually when I guess I met other Tristan on this call, who was like a big supporter of us from the early days. And I ended up just quitting my job, getting into a Solana hackathon and just kind of like, seeing what's going to happen. And we ended up winning out of this like hackathon that had like 10,000 people in it, which was pretty cool. And at that point I was like, yeah, I got to commit and go full in with that. So we wrote up some like crappy white paper. One of my friends happened to work at like a VC or something or other, and the partner there was just like, look, I'd love to fund you, let's do this, let's make it a thing. And so I just decided, let's go full time, let's build this thing. And over those, it's almost 3 years now, which is kind of crazy to think about, but we kind of have had our platform on mainnet. We've done over, I think, $700 million worth of volume. we went through the ups and downs of like peak Solana bull market. And then when FTX melted down, all of Solana DeFi kind of imploded. We had like 50 users and like jack shit in terms of volume, which was kind of sad. And you know, it was definitely a tough period. But since then, we've just been building. We launched Zeta V2. Everything's been going through the roof in terms of metrics. So we just hit, I think, $12 million of volume this morning, essentially, which is pretty cool on a daily basis, and 7,000 users, and that keeps growing. And there's this like renewed hype and interest for Solana DeFi. So just riding that wave and continuing to build.
Amazing, amazing. Yeah, I think
Calvin, I think you should pitch as well yourself a little bit. Introduce yourself.
Yeah, sometimes I forget in the presence of two Tristans that I still exist. Hey guys, Calvin from Impossible here. I think like Tristan as well. Sorry, Backpack Tristan came with jumping into crypto by working at an exchange as well. I spent 3 years at Binance as a counterpart, I guess, to some of the shenanigans that we've of course seen across the entire exchange space, and I guess it was also part of the reason why I was able to be introduced to Backpack Tristan, and so I think that's some of the magic of this space as well, that when you compete alongside others, I think you gain a level of respect as well in the way that they do things, and I think that that was also something that admittedly, maybe I didn't spend enough time in the early days looking at the entire Solana ecosystem. And that I think as a participant now at Impossible, working on early stage incubation and advisory and supporting as many projects as we can, the level of knowledge I think we need to understand is much more generalist than before, because what we didn't need to do when operating an exchange is actually really know what was happening outside of our little bubble of what we needed to do to make the exchange better. And I think slowly trying to repurpose ourselves as founders or as builders through the experiences that we have is definitely something that I think we're all in this kind of journey together on. And I think a lot of the things that we want to see as a space come from a lot of the founders that are willing to push themselves and try new things. And I think that's something I've seen from both Tristans here that I'd love to dive deeper in today.
We tried to get you in Seoul when we were roommates, Calvin. I will say I tried very, very, very early, and he was having none
I
of
have
it.
to give, I think Tristan and Mark from Pith got me the Calvin.soul back then, the Bonfida names. So I still have the Calvin.soul. So I tried, but I think you guys did a really good job in sticking with it. And I think Zeta, Tristan brought this up as well in the highs and lows of the Solana side. I feel like the community has been so well galvanized now that it feels like in some way the only other community that's invincible outside of the Ethereum world is, I think, the Solana world today.
Okay, so I want to get a little bit more into the tactical stuff. Okay, so we chose to have you three in this seminar is because you guys have you've built companies that have pivoted into something else and into something else and into something else. And you guys have fought really hard to find product market fit during different cycles. So let's start a little bit more specifically with you, Tristan Zeta. This is supposed to be for helping people with product market fit. Sometimes people have to understand that the demystification of you start something, you say, oh, this is gonna fucking work, it's gonna be great. And you start doing it, and sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't work, or sometimes normally works, but in a way that you don't expect. How was it for you?
Yeah, it was definitely pretty tough. We made some mistakes, which I think, that's all part of being a founder. For us, our journey, I guess, for those who have been around for a while, know that we started off as an options platform. That was, we kind of had this assumption options are this big market share in traditional finance. This is naturally going to flow into, the same kind of setup in DeFi. So we kind of naively assumed that we could kind of front run the market, almost get in there before, this kind of options market becomes really big. And I think in like hindsight, that was a bit of wishful thinking from me. I think I've changed my perspective a little bit in that I think you've kind of got to see what users care about, where the market's going, where the kind of interest and hype is. And if you're trying to build for something that kind of doesn't exist yet, you're going to have to like really push a lot of levers to try and, I guess, evangelize and make this thing a thing. And to be honest, I'm not a marketing person, so I don't have the skill set for that. So we built this options platform. We did a pretty good job. It worked really well. But the thing was, trying to convince people to trade options in the first place was really, really hard. And we made this like strategic pivot to do perps trading, which is just way simpler. Everyone trades it on all the centralized exchanges. It's just like the bread and butter of most crypto traders. And ever since doing that, I feel like our product market fit was just like so much better. The product is also easier to build, to do all the risk modeling and to write the smart contracts. And so that's just been so much better than it was before. So I think trying to start with things simpler and kind of growing complexity, as opposed to just going for like the world's most complex thing or trying to be the first to market, that can sometimes, like, I think, cause some pain and make things hard for you.
I want to zoom in a bit there. I think one of the things that you said, I actually would argue is maybe not product market fit, but actually founder market fit. I think you mentioned like maybe marketing isn't the part that you want to focus on. I wouldn't say you're not good at it. I mean, that photo of you and your mattress in your apartment went pretty viral, right? So in some way, I think virality is not something that you're afraid of, but I do think that on a day-to-day, what gives you excitement, and I think the energy to try to build is definitely more on the side of things where you really want to just execute. And I think I actually, as Jay knows, am a very big fan of options. I actually think that there's still a lot of room to eventually find some sort of fit on that side of things. But I think what you pointed at is with some of your experience or passion from other kind of past working experiences, that you can apply a lot of those concepts back to the perps market where there's already some market demand. And that I think there's that phrase like leading a horse to the water kind of thing, but you can't force it to drink. I feel like sometimes options for me is a sector that right now I'm still not sure if anyone will want to drink, but I do see the water. I see the water somewhere, right? And I think that's one of the things that I would love to see. More people keep on trying to challenge themselves into thinking what are possible questions that they could try to absorb or try to attack when they build their products. But I think on the topic of kind of tactics that you guys have tried to do in your journey, I think Backpack Tristan, you mentioned some of the things that you needed in terms of culture to try and improve some of the products that have been building the XNFT side of things. Even Impossible, we incubated a project that built a music XNFT project that got to be featured inside the app back then. But I think there's still a lot of things, like you said, in terms of building more of a community that was ready to use these XNFTs. So would love to zoom in a bit there on the points that you mentioned there too.
Yeah, sure. So I'm actually going to refer to some of these questions that were dropped in the chat. Because it relates to us quite closely in the sense of, and I'll read this out to some of the folks who are in the audience, but basically it's like, what is one unconventional thing you've done to grow or test ideas? And I think the starting point for everything that we've had on the non-product side was mystery. And that mystery, what are XNFTs? We had this initial wave where several people within the crypto ecosystem changed their Twitter handles to have XNFT in it. And people looked at this and they said, what is that? What are these guys doing? What are they coming to market with? But we revealed no information. And the general assumption, I think, was that it was an airdrop or an NFT mint. And it was right around the time when a lot of people were working on getting airdrops and NFT mints. And so people started engaging with it. And pretty quickly, it just started rolling into this giant ball of energy. And then we realized that we could craft that energy. So anything that we would post and put out into the world, people would engage with frenetically because everyone wanted an invite to the Discord, which we kept private at the beginning. And we pretty quickly realized that if we publicly displayed who got access to our Discord, then everyone else would start to emulate the actions that that person did. And so we got this entire group of early entrants to our Discord that created memes, wrote good long form content, were incredibly active, cared deeply about the space in different fashions. And this initial group of people that we got in through just keeping the mystery have been the backbone of everything else that we've done after that. And essentially, it's the backbone that brings the culture to all of these new entrants that enter. And so back then, we had 500 people in our Discord. We now have something like 25,000 people in our Discord. But as you guys have probably seen across the timeline, across socials, Mad Lad's culture has still stayed somewhat static in that people genuinely care about each other, people support the things that each other are doing. And I think that this all circles back into the point of making a core community that will support anything that you build in crypto. There's this whole point in crypto that you're building in public, but I don't think people take that as seriously as they should. When you're in the traditional startup space, you build quietly in stealth for the most part. No one sees what you're doing outside of your investors and perhaps your early beta testers. And then you have a moment where you bring this to the world. And in crypto, you really don't have that luxury because everything that happens in crypto happens across these different social platforms, and everyone within crypto is to some degree interconnected. And so that if you can essentially build in public while also making everyone that is building or going to use your product feel that they are a part of that process, you're much more likely to have success in crypto. And that's one of the core things that allowed us to get to where we are right now, which is like genuinely caring about these initial people that we let into the community.
I want to follow up
Yeah,
with this,
building in
Tristan.
public.
1 second, Kelvin. Do you think that that was a tactic that could be replicated, or after there is so many already projects that have done similar tactics, that that was just a moment in time where you found that perfect market fit and that success with the anticipation, with the mystery, and the hype of the NFTs back then?
So I think the core component perhaps isn't the mystery, although that serves an accelerant for everything that happens afterwards. It's more so taking the time to be on the ground level with these initial group of people that actually care about what you're doing when no one else cares. And if you empower that initial group of people that actually cares about what you're doing, they'll feel empowered to go and spread that to other people and slowly help you grow your community organically. So I think perhaps doing it in a way where doing what Portal Coin is doing right now is kind of a little bit of an old idea. But this core idea of really caring about who these individuals are at the beginning and spending time culturing that, I think will be invaluable to any crypto company. Because again, everything is just so social. We're always all on the same wavelength. And I think that's really important for crypto projects to realize.
Yeah, I think that's the part that, if you empower those believers, as you mentioned, that's going to be one of the things that helps you also get closer to what I think Zeta Tristan mentioned in terms of answering the needs of what customers actually have out there. When they buy into the mission or believe in what you do, they're also going to give you faster feedback on some of the things that they want to see, right? And I think that's definitely something that is hard, especially when I think Zeta Tristan, you mentioned about maybe building before options is really hot. One of the phrases we say a lot at Impossible is being dangerously early. I think both of you guys have done that in different ways, whether that is in going in Solana super early, supporting X NFTs, and this alludes to some of the mystery that you mentioned, Tristan, as well, right? That in order to be early, in order to have mystery, you do have to be earlier than other folks to be able to have still this mystery, right? I would love to hear a little bit more on the balance side of things of how to support the evangelists that are early, as well as just going in to execute.
Sorry, let me add one more thing, Tristan, not to hog the mic, but I think this thing Luna JMR put in the chat is really, really important, which is calling them evangelists, because I think the core analogy here for any crypto project that's watching this is Bitcoin. So it wasn't just that Satoshi solved the double spend problem that created everything that's come since then. It was that core group of libertarians and cyberpunks that saw this technology that Satoshi had created, and their minds exploded, and they said sovereign money, they said freedom of transaction. And so this was a really powerful thing that created them into evangelists. That I think that together with the technology has gotten us to where we are right now. And I think that needs to keep being repeated within the ecosystem.
Yeah, Zeta Tristan, you want to chime in on this one too?
Yeah, totally agree. I think Tristan has a really good point of buying in those early users. It's funny that JMR used to run a esports team called OG, but like we used to have the OG role back in the Discord. That's what everyone would kind of come into the Discord asking for, like when OG essentially. And I think being able to reward those people and make them feel like they were there on ground zero and they're almost like part of the team, part of the DAO or something or other, and they've built the thing up from kind of from nothing. That's really powerful. And those guys who stick around and you kind of incentivize them become really loud, pieces of amplification on Twitter. They go out there, they share your stuff. It really reaches past your kind of internal marketing team or something or other and becomes this like distributed mass of people who are going out there, retweeting each other, talking, about how much they love the product and getting their friends in. So I think those network effects are very powerful. And when people have that, I guess, that visceral connection to, whether it's Backpack or Zeta or any of these kind of projects, I think, yeah, you really can't underestimate that.
So Calvin, I have a question for you as well. Okay, so let's, for all the three of you. So you start with a hypothesis, right? A thesis when you start a company. Okay, this is what I think the company will do. This is what I think my business model will be. This is my level of acceptance that I think that the community will have. And with that, this will be a stage one, right? And then you start building and you start launching and you realize that, okay, your estimations were not completely accurate. So now you have to find or tailor your product market fit, right? How does your product fit into a community? And how do you start captivating, that community? And users will be one of the driving elements and KPIs for that. The other one is interest to investors, appetite for people. For you, Calvin, initially and 3 months later, how were the changes or how do you start finding that market fit?
Yeah, I think one of the points around product market fit, I think, as well as knowing how your competitors play. I think the mistake that I started out with first off was for sure that I just thought that if I do good things, people will come. And I think a lot of builders have this naive belief that doing just what you set out to do, it doesn't mean that changing isn't as scary as it looks because everything in the world changes, right? The field of dreams analogy I think Jay's mentioned before, right? In some way, the answer is some people just won't come if you're too far away from every possible city in the world, right? And I think that's part of the growing pains of trying to build, that you don't realize how much in your theory or your mind of what you set out to do is actually truly the lay of the land, right? And that the most you can do is just hear the feedback of what you have. And I think also getting your hands dirty into trying things that get you in front of more users is something that I think is really important. I think we announced yesterday that we'll be the official launchpad for Ronin Axie Infinity's chain. And this is already the 33rd month of Impossible's existence. And even then, I still need to figure out what are the right chain ecosystems to build on top of. That I think that's something where, your direction in crypto always has to be somewhat flexible in order to be positioned to figure out how you can even get to talk to 1,000 users, right? There are a lot of chain ecosystems that won't have the level or the luxury of the community that you can get some sort of feedback in. And I think being able to be on your toes, to be able to adjust as necessary is something that's really important.
So you mentioned a few things that are very interesting, and I'm going to pass it for you, Tristan Zeta. He said, look, as you started thinking the hypothesis that I'm going to work really hard, I'm going to do a product that is really good, and then people will come. That is, I think, I don't want to call it a mistake, but this is a thesis that most founders start with. I'm just going to work hard and just build something really cool and people will come. And then he mentioned you have to get feedback and then you have to be flexible. How is that feedback internalized and where do you go to find that feedback that is good? Because, everybody's going to give you different directions and everybody has a new idea.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I guess, I don't know if you want to call it a mistake, like you said, but we definitely went through this, especially in our first year.
They're choices, no mistakes. They're choices. Exactly.
Being a first-time founder, I think you have this imposter syndrome of you don't really know, I guess how you're building the company or what you should be building necessarily. But I think as a hardcore engineer and a bit of a workaholic, we just wanted to build cool things or whatever, or things that kind of like tickled our fancy in terms of like, oh, I'm going to do all this Rust programming, it's a lot of fun. And you build this really complex product and you kind of deploy it and you get a kick out of it, the engineer in you, and then you put it out there and then like 5 people care about it on Twitter. And then it's just like, oh, okay, that's kind of disappointing. And you're trying to like push this product or something or other that people aren't that interested in, or that you haven't marketed really well, or you haven't found out what your kind of like unique differentiator is. So we were definitely grappling with that for a while, because we were like, wow, we put all this time into our matching engine and how we like, dealt with our volatility, curves and stuff like that. And then I very quickly realized like people don't care too much about that. That stuff is like the niche kind of details. And the more that we started actually talking to people in the community, it just became like a light bulb where I have this like internal view of what I think people want. And then I started talking to people who actually use the platform or who are in crypto and who don't use the platform. And then they're like, there's this that I really want, or this is much more interesting to me, or this is very confusing. And I think it's a mistake that a lot of crypto teams make. I don't know why. I think Tristan Yver is very different and he's very like in touch with the community. But I think a lot of like the early DeFi teams would just kind of build in a vacuum, and you kind of wouldn't get that feedback loop from users, which to me is crazy because like Tristan mentioned, you're literally in the same like Discord or Telegram channel as these guys. It's not like Web2 where you have like a dedicated customer research team. It's like very at arm's length. They do these formal interviews. And so something that worked really well for us was we just spun up a Telegram group essentially. And we just like, get users of the platform in there. And we just had like a discussion. People would use the platform. They'd complain about certain things. Things were broken, or they'd say, I don't like this, or like, please list this new asset. And just literally addressing that feedback, taking that, putting that in the product. People get such enjoyment out of it when they're like, there's this thing I'd really like. I come in there, I fix it, I talk to the devs, we put it in production the next day. They come back to it and they're like, oh my God, you listened to me. I love using this product because I can talk to the team and they actually do the things that, I care about. On the other flip side of the coin, you don't want to listen to like every piece of feedback. Some people just complain all the time. It's very hard to cater to everything. But I think, you got to be very much like in touch with the people who use your platform, really cater to them. They know best. I think there's like a saying in startups is like the customer always knows best. So, that's what we try and do these days a lot more.
Okay, so I have a question for you because I actually disagree with this. Maybe it's just because I grew up in a world where Steve Jobs tells people what they want. It's like you create the demand and then you serve the demand. And maybe that's why maybe I'm not that successful, but I don't start by thinking, what do people want? I start thinking, what do I think I am qualified to give them? And then how am I going to go about to give it to them? And I believe that I can force a market fit to maybe tactics that Tristan Backpack does. Because you're thinking product and Tristan Backpack is thinking community. So now the intersection of that is where I think the magic could happen. Am I completely wrong?
I have a third view. I have a third
You have a third
perspective.
view. Bring it on.
Which is you go look for problems to solve. You go see where there's vacuums. You go see where there are serious problems in the space or industry that you want to work in, and then you figure out if you can solve those problems. I think that's probably the core of it. And for the most part, like if there is, that's like one of the easiest ways to find PMF is if you solve someone's problem, because then you don't have to convince them that they need whatever it is you're doing. They already know they need it because they have that problem. So I think that's also another really good way for people to get started. Like when we got the inspiration for doing a wallet, it was because all of these different people were getting drained. There were people all over every chain ecosystem getting their wallets drained over and over and over again. So our first thought was, well, what if we created a smart wallet? What if we had decentralized 2FA? What if we had withdrawal limits? What if we made it so that you had your hot wallet and your cold wallet without having to use a ledger and all these different things? We quickly ran into the wall that was transaction sizing for proxy instructions in Solana, but that was the initial problem that we set out to solve. And it gave us the base for everything else, because once we fell upon the wallet, we never left the wallet idea. We knew that we couldn't just come to market with a wallet that had better UI UX that time had already passed, but we knew that the wallet was the base level of distribution for everything else happening in crypto. And so we knew that there were enough people having problems with wallets across the crypto space that we could create a solution to their problem. They may want to use our product. And then from there, it was all the iterative phases of WeChat's really cool. What if there's a crypto app that has a bunch of mini apps inside of it? And then we're like, well, if we host that, we have the legal liability if somebody builds a gambling app. Shoot, we can't do that anymore. And then wait, what if we hosted the code through a token, through an NFT? What if we tokenized the code? What if in the same way that a token tokenizes a JPEG, what if we did the same for a bundle of code? And then we already have an execution environment, which is this wallet. Boom, okay, this is something new. No one's done this before. We can use it as our story to come to market. And then I think that's the second part. Is like, what is your story? What's the problem you want to solve? And then what story do you want to tell around that product so that people create whatever association they have with what you're doing? So those were the first two things. Although going back to what I was talking about earlier, we super quickly realized that just product and story isn't enough if people don't care about what your product and story is. We're pretty lucky that we already had a lot of rapport in the ecosystem and we had a lot of support no matter what we did. So I'm not going to say we had a traditional start. We had an incredibly blessed start because of all the work we've done in the ecosystem for the last 4 years. But it was still this fact of having a story and bringing it to the market that allowed us to create everything. And then also the realization that you can't just do it with tech and product. You have to have a community in crypto. It's so different than any other industry. People have to care about what you're doing because people's value signaling or the sense through which they understand what is valuable or what has traction in crypto is actually all through Twitter. It's really ridiculous. Like it might have no association with how many users your product has, but if you have 1 million people yelling about you on Twitter, it's going to make everyone else on Twitter think that what you're doing is really important and that they should pay attention to what you're doing. And that's why I like always hark on that, even sometimes before product, as I did when I was talking earlier.
Dude, that is an incredible answer. I'm gonna pass it to Calvin, because Calvin, you were working on the launchpad of Binance, and there was an incredible market fit. And then you were like, okay, I am gonna start my new company. And the hypothesis that you had was because of the research that you can do and because of your taste or king-making abilities, you're gonna be able to identify these projects and you're gonna be able to help them. So which one or how do you enter your search for product market fit in your company?
Yeah, I think I want to take it back to actually what Backpack Tristan mentioned. I think after also watching Armani, your co-founder, build a lot of core governance tools or other things that were also problems that needed to be solved in Solana, right? In some way, I would actually counter all of your takes earlier, and I'd say maybe we shouldn't think that every problem has a story to be told. Maybe some problems are problems that can be solved, but they also are learning experiences or things that build credibility that you guys as both builders have already gone through in terms of cycles to prove what you're capable of doing. But I think there are some stories that just don't have a story to tell. They are just exactly what it is. Solana maybe didn't have a governance infra, and Armani set out to do it in the early days, and that built a lot of, as Tristan, you mentioned, the rapport, the opportunities that you guys had in the Solana ecosystem via the work that you as a team have already done before, right? And I think tying that to Jay, your question about what I felt I had done for the Launchpad as a sector, I felt like the word Launchpad is called Launchpad because of the work I did. The problem is I didn't own the story. In terms of setting out to say, if Michael Jordan wins a bunch of championships, he's somewhat associated with basketball. I thought that I had built the championship logic in the first place. But unfortunately, the market didn't know that story, right? So of course, maybe the investors that I got to meet or some of the builders I got to meet along the way, they were familiar with the things that I had done before. And so that was also where, similarly, I think we had the blessing of having some of these connections to start Impossible in the first place. But we didn't actually get our hands dirty enough to the level to understand, the first 1,000 users that even used the Launchpad at Binance. So I think when we started Impossible, there was still a lot of gap in hearing out the community. I think we did something similar to Zeta, Tristan's point about just making a Telegram chat. And I think some of what the Telegram chats enable is that pulse on the community. And I think we even built a custom feedback page. I think it's still live, feedback.impossible.finance. So users can upvote the different kind of points of which things they want to see be added to our product. And I think in the market conditions of the last few years, right, I think one of the main things that I didn't want to answer directly when thinking about building a launchpad. As Jay mentioned, building a product, I wanted to build a product that showcases our research, but reality is that people come to an investment platform to make investments and to make money. And I think I lived in my own little bubble of what I wished people came to fit my product rather than try to build something as back Tristan mentioned of something where you're actually finding these needs in the market. And I think that's definitely something that I think Jay's mentioned. It's wishful thinking.
This is literally 99% of my problems in life, you know? I always think about what the best version is. Is this not logic? Why does the rest of the world don't follow exactly the precise logic that I follow in my mind? How are you not seeing exactly how I'm seeing? Why don't you like exactly the same food that I like? Why don't you like exactly the same movies that I like? And me projecting that, oof, it's like 90% of my problems.
I do think that was also one of the things, though, that was some of the core DNA that I think both Binance and FTX in the early days actually built off of. A lot of us were just genuinely users of exchanges, and we wanted to see user experiences get better because we felt the same pain points ourselves, or we felt like the industry wasn't far enough in some of the things that were offered for users. I think this is very similar to the thought process of solving the pain point of users getting hacked via various wallet interactions. And I think some of that product market fit comes from you assessing whether or not you as a founder are representative of the community or the people that are running into these problems, right? And I think that is a necessary projection. It's just how do you make sure that you hear the voices of all the possible users that exist there? I think Zeta, Tristan, I do want to zoom more into your point about the options versus perps side of things, because I think that was something where for you yourself, did you trade a lot of options? Like what got you interested into trying to solve the problem first of options before going back into the perp side of things?
Yeah, good question. I traded a little bit myself, but finance is not my background. I'm more like a tech guy. So I feel like the kind of fit there was a bit different. It was my co-founders that came from high frequency trading, options trading, stuff like that. So they understood this stuff like the back of their hand, essentially. It was really natural for them. For me, I think it was always like a bit of a struggle. It's not something I would go on like Binance or one of these platforms or like and start trading options, because that's probably a little bit more complicated than what I trust myself. I wouldn't say I'm an amazing trader, plenty of times that I've lost money. So I usually try and stick to spot and kind of safer stuff, perps. So once we started doing the perp stuff, I'm like, oh, even for me, I feel like using my platform more, which was just such like a light bulb moment. I think it was just kind of crazy before we had this complex platform. I'm like, I know how it works, but I wouldn't go out there and like trade on it that often because I was like, I don't even trust myself to make money reliably because it's such like a sophisticated trading experience and you've got to monitor a lot of risk and think about a lot of different variables. So that was really good for us. Once we moved that, I'm like, I'm already using the platform more. And so that was good. Also just doing user interviews, I think helped so much in terms of these light bulb moments. We actually started doing like a formal process where we just get people on a Google Meets like this essentially, or like a Zoom call, and we just pay them like $50 or some tokens or something like that. And we would just do like usability testing. We'd ask them like what competitors they use, what kind of crypto trading activity they do. And it's kind of interesting seeing the different archetypes. Some people just kind of student, just kind of punting a bit of crypto on the side. Some people kind of semi-professionally trade. It was a real kind of breadth of different people. Some people were like founders at other protocols who were just doing this kind of stuff on the side. And then I think it was pretty cool through the usability stuff. We'd be like, here's our platform, try and deposit, place your first trade. And some people would just be like, where's the button to deposit? I can't find it. And you try not to like push them down any specific path. And it just became really obvious to you as someone who'd been building the product for a year plus that you have these glasses on almost where you're like, oh yeah, it all makes sense. I know where all the different configurations of this and that are. It's like so obvious to me. And then you take a user basically from kind of, your Telegram channel or someone who's never used the platform, and they suddenly run into all these roadblocks and are super confused. And I'm like, okay, this thing is not intuitive. I got to go and tweak it. And the more that we kind of made those adjustments, new people will come in and they're like, oh yeah, it's so obvious now. Like this works. This is how I expect that. Yeah, that was great for us.
So I have a question, and then we're gonna go back also 1 second, Calvin. So let's say that there is a timing that you think that it will be critical for launch with product market fit to achieve that product market fit, that inertia, but the product is actually not ready on the stage that you guys wanted. What is then the question is then what is better, or how do you really target this product market fit? Is just users the only thing that determines market fit? If my project is garbage but I have users, then I have market fit.
Yeah, I would say so. I think users are the strongest signal. Obviously, it can be gamed a bit. When you have airdrops and stuff like that, people will just kind of civil it to the extent that you can see that these are like real kind of users as opposed to just like wallets on chain, doing some programmatic activities. That's really good. And I'm definitely a fan of getting that signal ahead of time. If you don't have that, and I think you're like, okay, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to build for the next year, I'm going to launch the world's best product or something like that, right? And then you go out there, you launch something that you think is great in your mind, and then no one cares. I think it's much better to like get the thing out there, even if it's like not that usable. This is something that we did in the very early days when we did this hackathon. Our platform was basically just like a DevNet platform. It didn't even like run real money. It was just like paper trading essentially. And we got it out there. People started logging in. We put it on Twitter. We sent it to some of the judges. They started trading. They shared it on Twitter. More people started using it. So we probably had a couple of hundred people like actually try the platform. And you could put the paper money in. We just airdrop you these kind of fake USDC tokens. They start trading, and people are loving it. They're like, I love that it updates in real time, that I can kind of do these kind of transactions and place these trades. And it kind of proved to me that there was something there that people really liked, this like on-chain trading activity, the way that we showed like the P&L, and it changed in real time, with the kind of fast nature of Solana, I guess, where you get updates every second or so. People really liked that, and it's not like they were risking real money. People could actually try and break the platform. Our backend was super janky as well. We got this thing up in 2 weeks essentially, and we ran it all hotspots on our own phone because we couldn't afford to pay for like RPC services and stuff like that. But it was fine, we did it as like a very low risk thing, and I think it proved out the idea.
Okay, so Tristan, the follow-up with you is if we use users as the main indicator, since we met in Amsterdam, your platform has done this, boom. What has changed? What have you done differently? Or you was just like finally, critical mass hit with a product that was already really good,
I think it's basically what you guys touched on before. You could build a really good product, and I wouldn't say our product changed overnight, that it was suddenly fantastic. That was what I was doing the whole bear market essentially, was just like building, fixing bugs, going through our infrastructure and making sure that it doesn't break when we kind of scale. And I'm glad I put in all that effort ahead of time, because if we didn't make those changes a year ago, I think our platform probably would have like collapsed and had all these errors essentially now. But yeah, just kind of building in the background, making sure the platform's good enough. And then I think it's the distribution bit that kind of Tristan has touched on here. Going out there, the narrative changes for Solana, you start evangelizing things more, you kind of show how fast your order book is, how easy it is to use. It's like word of mouth referrals, people start talking to each other. It also helps that, people are trying to farm these incentives or expecting airdrops and stuff. So it's kind of nice. People from Ethereum say, come to kind of, I guess, farm a potential airdrop or do some points or something or other, but then they stay because they realize, hey, this product's actually pretty good. It's like some ETH influencer or whatever literally messaged me this morning. He's like, I know I was a Solana hater for the last year, but he's like, I used your platform and it's probably the best perps platform I've used to date. And I was like, that's great. All you need to do is like really get them into the platform, overcome that activation energy.
Something I want to add, and tell all the founders that may be listening or future founders that listen, is be super careful, because what we've been saying maybe sounds like you should just do whatever your users ask you to do. That is not at all the case. Like, you should be hyper opinionated. You should have a super strong educated view on what your product should look like over long periods of time. But you should be very open-minded to adapt if anyone gives suggestions that you, within your framework of the world, think are positive and will help you get to where you want to go. So just want people to be really mindful. It's not like anytime a user requests something, that's the thing that you prioritize. It's much more that you have a very, very good mental model of what you're building and where you want it to go. And does the idea that was suggested to you allow your product or company to get there? Because I have definitely seen the converse of that, where people just take every suggestion. And we've seen even internet companies die when they end up with is a trillion tabs and no true purpose, because every user of theirs wanted something different. So I do want to say that, like, what Jay was saying is that there really is a component of the Apple strategy that needs to be in place, which is we will create the demand for what we are building because we have a vision of the world that we think will materialize. And I think you need to have that vision as well when you're building something. You can't just, I don't think that it's easy to enter a space and try and build something without a vision of why what you're building can make a difference over a long period of time in the space and how you're going to get there and the things that you need to do to get to that point. So again, if people give good suggestions, be open-minded to them. Don't get fixed in your ways, but don't think that any suggestion that comes in from somebody is what you should do for your product. So really want to clarify that. Although I will add that there is a magic to, as Tristan said, where if somebody gives you feedback and you think it's good and you implement it rapidly, you now have a loyal fan. That person felt like they contributed directly to what you're building, and now they deeply care about what you're building at a personal level that you wouldn't have been able to achieve with almost anything else. So definitely let people know that give you good suggestions when you do implement them, because it'll make them very happy and it'll make them continue to think about suggestions that they can give you. But I think the core premise of what I'm saying right now is you need to be hyper opinionated to be a founder, and you need to know where you think the puck is moving, because the two most valuable things in crypto are, one, being able to create the meta, and two, being able to know where the meta is moving before it's moved there. And I think in crypto, more than any other industry in the world, like that's what it's all about.
Yeah,
So
I
I
think
have a
the
question for
human
Calvin. Yes, I
side.
was gonna go for you. Go ahead. Sorry.
No worries, no worries. I think the human side of that meta is exactly the magic of the space, right? We have to understand the users to even know that there is a meta, right? And a lot of the things that back Tristan, you mentioned about the opinionation of founders, right? Is opinionation a word?
We'll
That
take
we
it. We'll
have to,
accept it. Run with it.
yeah, let's go with the opinion that it's a word, right? That if we are able to put our stamp of what we think is important, ultimately, I do think that when we think about the projects that we build, we are like parents. We care a lot about what our child should have or shouldn't have. Of course, there's going to be useful random strangers along the way, but you also know who's family, right? You also know who are the people, like you said, that give this feedback, give these ideas, and you need to take care of them just as much as they are somehow related to your family tree of how these users exist inside your community and ecosystem, right? And I think that's something that it's still really hard to grasp, because when I was at Binance, the users were already there. I didn't do things to figure out the cold start of how to get them to come to believe in the visions or the ideas, right? And in some way, maybe I would say in a weird way, working at a company in crypto, you almost get be a stepfather. Like the kid's just there, the people are just there, right? And you just need to fit into the family somehow. Whereas when you are a founder yourself, you need to figure out how this whole family is yours. At the end of the day, people remember you for the things that you do with that community, with those users. So I think it's definitely a different perspective being a founder versus being an employee at a company.
Well, Calvin, I have a follow-up for you, because your company, your whole basic premise of the company is this community that you're able to build, and the double exchange of value. They come and invest with you, and they provide intel and they provide support to the projects, and then you have to provide to them a reason why they should be staking your token, holding that. So you're literally a tribal leader in many ways, you know? How do you think then, from guiding a tribe versus product market fit on the tech part, like there's so many things to jiggle?
Sometimes I do think so. I think Tristan, you mentioned about going to like skate where this meta or the puck is going. I think the difficulty of Launchpad is sometimes you have to pick things that the users don't even know will be a meta yet, and you need to be the champion for some of these metas before people are even willing to invest in, right? That's kind of why you see me trying to grill Zeta Tristan. Maybe options can make a comeback, right? These types of ideas, I need to be the champion of the meta itself, not just my own product sometimes. And I think that's definitely a difficult one, but when it works, it definitely has a lot of momentum that can be built for the community. I think an example was in 2021, maybe a little bit before Facebook rebranded to Meta. we actually launched a project on our platform that was a metaverse related project. And so being early enough before even the kind of market validation of, oh, even Facebook is going after metaverse. I think that was something that was perfect timing, and that actually helped us give users a chance to make one of the best investments on our platform to date. So I think being early and being that opinionated step is actually really, really important. But then furthermore, if you aren't trying to do more to understand what's happening across the space and then try to fit yourself into those stories, Impossible has nothing to do with metaverses, right? But the users on our platform may need to know what a metaverse is. And I think that type of ownership or protection of those users or community to guide them in what you think they need, or the Jobs, Steve Jobs, like, you need this thing that fits in your pocket to listen to music. I do think that's actually a really important part of the story.
Okay, so we're gonna go with Q&A. We're gonna bring Jamie in. I hope he has a shorter version of this. Hello, Jamie. Welcome back.
I've got a shortened version, although I think it's been answered pretty well, like comprehensively throughout. But yeah, I wrote down like just a different version of it, basically a shorter one. One of the things for me is like this, like tricky around this market fit is when users, they don't grasp the possibilities yet with like emerging technologies. So how do you like balance sticking to your product vision while educating users about, solving that problem that they didn't even realize existed? Like you don't want to be sort of like arrogant to say, actually this product does exist and you've got this problem. But at the same time, sometimes I think education around the problem that they might not realize they have can be super important as well. So how do you find that balance?
To either of you guys?
Doug?
Yeah,
I
can jump in. I think it's like
balance. Oh, sorry.
Maybe
Go ahead,
not at the
Tristan.
same time.
Yeah, I can jump in quickly. I think it's like an education thing. I think in crypto, especially, things are extremely complicated. And unless you have a PhD in cryptography, you probably don't get it first go. So I think being able to say things in kind of the same language as the kind of people on your platform, I think really helps to kind of empathize with them and explain things to them. I don't try and go into the details of how we, did our hashing algorithm and how we did whatever under the hood, and try and force all that technical information on people, because I think people's eyes just glaze over. And maybe like the builders and stuff kind of respect it, but I think for the average user, going out there and just writing a thread about like why your thing matters and kind of explaining how it works and what kind of problem it solves for people, doing stuff where you can actually kind of like step them through the process, having good documentation, things like that matter a lot. I mean, I saw this really well that like Tristan Armani did, not to steal his thunder, but like all this XNFT stuff. When I first heard about it, I'm like, this doesn't make any sense to me, or like I didn't get the concept. And then the more that they kind of explained it and I went there and played around with it myself, I'm like, oh, okay, this is like pretty logical. I see what they're getting at here. And the kind of vision made a lot more sense to me.
Backpack, would you like to add on?
Just to confirm, was the question, how do you relate to an audience? Or I missed, I thought it was about work-life balance, so I must have totally missed the question.
I think Jamie left us already.
Could you
Jamie?
repeat it, Jamie?
Okay, I just muted. Yeah, no, it was just around the educational piece around them like not understanding the problem at the very start, right? So how do you balance like getting that user feedback while also sort of educating around this problem that they might not even know existed because it's like emerging technologies, right? So, I think that can be like really important sometimes. So yeah, how do you get that balance?
Yeah, so I think we're disproportionately fortunate in crypto, again, crypto Twitter, because all the real problems in crypto surface on crypto Twitter constantly. So for the most part, like the problems are actually identified versus being unsolved, unidentified problems. So you have identified unsolved problems, which is an easier starting point. So I'd say that's the first thing. And then the second thing is probably the positioning that you want to have with your storytelling isn't, I am here solving your problem, I am here solving your problem, I'm here solving your problem. It's just like, I am giving you such a good experience that you wouldn't even think that these problems existed. And that's when you've gotten over to the other side. And then that will just spread over time. And if somebody did face that problem, they'll now realize that they don't have the problem anymore. But for everyone else, they're just like, this is what the new standard quote should look like.
Amazing. Thank you so much for the question. We're gonna bring Karen Sheng. She asked this question and Tristan Backpack answered on chat. and I think it was a really good answer, but I also want to hear Calvin and Zeta.
Can I just jump one more thing on Jamie's one? Because I
Yeah,
think
of course.
Tristan, Tristan mentioned something there I want to add a little bit on, especially with this building in public part, right? In some way, I think there's a second degree effect to the wow effect. And I think there's a meme as well from you guys with wow spelled WAO with more mystery and more fun to it. I think especially when you get to that level of wow, then that is like a maybe pain point level that you've achieved and maybe just piquing people's curiosity in what you're able to do. And I think going for that wow factor in a market where you know that the market participants are so public helps them give ammunition to want to tell their friends, right? If you don't get to that wow factor, I'm not sure if people really want to tell other people that they're using your product. They might just be pretty happy, enjoying it in their basement, whatever it might be. But that if you hit that wow factor, then, a lot more people are willing to further, that education process.
Jamie, we want to leave a little bit of time for Karen and the other people, but if you want to type a question, we will do our best to address it. Karen, what is your next question, please?
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Juan. Thanks for all the panelists for sharing your insights. So I have a follow-up question for all the panelists. So this question is specifically related to what Tristan from Backpack said about the importance of identifying a problem to solve. So this is something that I have experienced firsthand as a builder. So over the process of validation and iteration, what if the founders and the founding team realize that what they build is actually a vitamin instead of a painkiller? So in this kind of scenario, should they try to gain traction with what they already built, the so-called vitamin, or quote-unquote vitamin product, or should they go back to the drawing board and try to identify a pain point to address?
So I'll just repeat. Thanks for the question, Karen. I'll just repeat what I put in text, which is it's just a little bit playful, but it's just in regards to the language that you used, which I think that if you've ended up building a vitamin instead of a painkiller, that means you probably built something more effective because you're going after causes versus symptoms. So you've actually figured out that you can do preventive measures for people instead of having to dampen symptoms. So I think that's probably like from a philosophical perspective, kind of a better thing to be building. But I think the other question there as well is that what is the market for this vitamin? Do people care about it? Do people want to take this vitamin? Will it make their life better? And if so, does it have a larger addressable market than the painkiller would have? Is there more opportunity for you to grow within this market than the painkiller would have because of your core expertise? There's a reason you got to this product. Why did you end up there instead of the painkiller? And if you question each step of the way that got you there, it might give you an answer as to why you've gotten there and if it's something that you can continue to serve the market with.
Alvin, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I think this one, Tristan actually, I think used to sometimes like give me vitamins when I was like staying up too late at the apartment, right? So I actually have seen firsthand the way that Tristan prescribes himself to this logic of a lot of preventative healing. Like we had yoga mats in the apartment, a lot of the things that I think Tristan thinks about is like this like higher level thinking. I will actually go the opposite side on this one though, even though I actually value, I think, in my regular life, things that Backpack Tristan is mentioning. But I think from the user perspective, that's a luxury that a lot of builders don't have. I think, Karen, your point here is something where I will say for myself and both Tristans, we've had the luxury to raise significant runway for the products that we build. We have time to see if that vitamin actually has an addressable market. Not every builder has that opportunity to see what are the plans to try and preventatively heal anyone, right? And if we are really testing how users feedback from this, it's not something where you give someone a vitamin and you say, poof, this person is, cured forever, right? We actually have to observe and assess over time. And not every project has enough runway to be able to have the right time to assess properly. You could also kill maybe a possible rehab program before you see the effects, right? And I think that if this kind of painkiller versus vitamin part, I would say there are a few ways as well. I think that people can also make good businesses out of vitamins, but they need to tell the story that people need vitamins, which I have not taken a vitamin for maybe 3 months. And my co-founder, Gareth, he spends a lot of time at the office with me. Like he gives me like a vitamin D pill because sometimes I don't get enough sunlight, right? But it doesn't matter if I'm not the end purchaser in some way. I might not create enough demand for this product in a literal vitamin sense. And in our own product, I would say you also need to not only know if you're a vitamin or a painkiller, but how many other vitamins and how many other painkillers are out there in the market, right? If all of the other launchpads, for example, sell painkillers, maybe the story of people needing painkillers is actually already out there as well. And I think this is a very blunt one on the 100Xs and the quick flips that you see in other launchpads. People have created an entire market around the painkillers. And maybe I only have a bunch of, more open-minded folks that want to believe in longer-term investing on my platform, right? And I do think that I've spent maybe 2.5 years trying to sell vitamins. And I think this is still where none of us are, even if we found some level of success or fit inside our PMF journeys, I think we always have to continue reassessing what do we really think we believe in solving and what gets us to have enough energy at the start of the day to try and tackle these problems.
Okay. I want to bring it back to Zeta. Zeta, I have this vision of you being such a strong builder that you try to not get to the stage of painkillers, right? If you are building everything from the beginning, everything that you should be making will never get you there. So how do you angle this yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think a lot of teams do this, right? You can take, I guess, it's like the path less traveled is like, let's kind of build this thing from the ground up and really try and build something that's kind of going to last for a few years, or let's just fork Uniswap and just put it on another chain. I think a lot of, builders are just like, where should I build in DeFi? And I think for me, it really crystallizes down to if you're serious about building a startup, I think you got to look for those 10x opportunities. I think if you're building something that has very incremental value, maybe you can raise a bit of money and it's like easy to go, you're going to build this thing and it's going to be marginally better than what's already out there. And you've kind of just cloned a product that already exists. It's not enough for someone to actually go through the switching costs of going and jumping to your product. So for us, that was a big thing. We kind of started looking at what was in Ethereum DeFi, where they have on-chain order books. There were like multi-dollar wide spreads. There were like gas fees of like $20+. I tried to use it myself. I'm like, this is completely unusable. Am I going to try and copy the same playbook and end up in the same kind of state with this really janky product that I don't believe in, that I think is like kind of broken? Or am I going to go kind of find and do my research on like the chains that are out there, the technology I can build on, really engineer it from like the bottom up essentially? And now we've built this platform where you can trade on chain on like a distributed network all around the world in 400 milliseconds. Essentially, it feels like a centralized exchange. I think it's like quite a feat of engineering. But it did take us 2 and a bit years to get here. So it was like a much longer journey. But now people are coming to us and they're like, oh, you're not just like a fork of whatever other random protocol I used on Ethereum. Like you've built everything from scratch. And it's done in a way that's like optimized for the exact use case that we're building for.
We're going to bring Nine. Nine, you wrote a bunch of questions, but I would like you to ask this one, the one that I wrote here.
The one in the chat, right, Jay?
Yes, the thought on incremental.
Oh, yes. Thank you for having me, guys. So I was just wondering, like, what are your general thoughts on incremental improvements? I'm sure Tristan, Backpack Tristan already answered this in the chat, but curious on what your take on is how you, like, creating a product which provides incremental improvements on existing, proven pain points that is out there versus crafting out your own narrative. Thank you, guys.
Sure, maybe I can start because I have to actually head off to another call. But I think it really comes down to storytelling, as I put in the chat, which is that you can tell a completely different story in the same proven segment that many other people are offering very similar things as you. I mean, we see this, what's a good example? The restaurant world's an amazing example. Like how many people make burgers and how many people make it work making burgers when there's so many other people out there that make burgers? And a lot of that is like the storytelling of the places that are most successful stand out amongst all the other people that are offering the same service. So I think that's one thing. Like if there's a proven segment that you're really interested in, you think you can provide value, you think you can do things that move it forward, it's just finding what the story you're crafting is and what the angle that you have that others aren't perhaps sharing with the world. And maybe that drives people to use you. But I do think that the true C-level changes are, as JMR was saying earlier, like the things that Steve Jobs has done, which is just completely recreating new segments, new metas, things that haven't existed before, which is probably the hardest thing to do in all of entrepreneurship, but also the one that, when tapped correctly, has the most value by many, many, many orders of magnitude. So I think it's a little bit of a balance of both. And I think that you can also get to that second thing by starting on the first. And again, Steve Jobs, good example, right? They started on the Macintosh and there already were computers in the world. There were a lot actually quite similar to what the first Macintosh was. There wasn't that much differentiation other than like some of the stuff Wozniak had done with the chips. And so you start somewhere and that gives you a base or a foundation to be able to build on top of. And who knows, maybe you'll get to the point where you can tie together the different things that you've done in these proven segments to create an entirely new segment or create an entirely new meta. So anyway, that's my thoughts on it. And I do have to drop, but I really appreciate all of you for your time. Thank you so much for hosting this.
You have a
Take care,
crazy,
guys.
amazing answers. Thank you so much for your time. We're going to
Bye.
stay a little bit more with the other guests because we have other questions, but I want also to Zeta to also discuss or answer what Nine just, the question that, oh my God, I can't even talk. The question that Nine just asked, please.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I touched on it a bit in my previous answer, but I think to clarify or like to crystallize it down to one thing, for me, I see it as kind of your almost your experience or your time throughout the startup. I think when you start in the early days, I think the real risk is that you try and go too far out there. You shoot really high on something that's really unproven, that the market quite isn't there, and you risk, I think, being too early and building something that potentially people don't want. I think something that was good for us is when I started, we tried to do something that was really out there that had never been done before. That was an extremely tough journey. I really kind of felt this imposter syndrome of like, why am I building this kind of stuff? It keeps failing. It's really hard. I'm trying to reinvent the wheel here. And I kind of pivoted my thinking towards, hey, there are a lot of things that don't need reinventing. The exchange business is like pretty, well understood. Not to say that we would just like copy things directly, but we can take a lot of inspiration from these kind of things. And so we thought, like, let's just build out things that are table stakes for this exchange. We built these things out. People love it. And now we're in a good position where I have a few years of experience where I feel like, okay, we've got the basic things done. I really understand the market, the product, what we can do. Now I can go ahead, above and beyond, do the whole Steve Jobs thing, think about new product lines. We already have a very engaged user base. We have revenue. We have all these other things. We have a bit of a war chest through the bear market, of funds that we've raised. We have the potential to be able to go and build new things. But I think if you're starting day one, you've got like some friends and family, angel tickets, you are working with your like co-founder or something or other, and you're trying to reinvent crypto and build like a brand new L1, I think that's like going to be like a very difficult thing to do. But you build up to those things in experience, in capital, and then I think you can take on like the hairier problems from there. I think a really good example is like DYDX. They've been building for like 5 years. They didn't spring up out of nowhere. They've been building for like a really long time. They built like the first kind of perp stacks. They made a lot of mistakes. They kind of improved. Now they're the market leader. Now that they're the market leader building on some other chain, now they can do their own app chain and they can kind of own the entire stack and they can really like, go above and beyond, I think, what's been done in crypto, build fully on-chain order books, do all this kind of crazy stuff.
Calvin, how about you? New narrative versus incremental improvements.
Yeah, I think it's a risk tolerance thing and an ambition question. I think you can find out right when you talk to somebody, what are they going after? Are they trying to hit a home run or are they just trying to, to use a baseball analogy, just bunt somebody over, right? So I think that's the key part of it. And I think it's just whatever your fit of what you want to believe to see in the world. You have to go after what's in your heart in that sense. It might not be the right one, but I think you'll live worse with the regret that you didn't go after the ambition that you wanted inside your own product.
Amazing. We're going to go with one more question, but before we go with that, I would like to answer part of this myself. I think that one of the things that I always tell people from OG or people that I work with is if you have a market already that is a red ocean and you're coming with a new product that is very similar to other things that are there, while you have to be, they say, 40% better than everybody there in order for you to have an immediate impact into the industry. But it's very hard to come up with a product that is 40% superior than everybody else from day one without test cases, without like experience doing this, without, so it's really hard. So while you launch the product and you have incremental improvements, it's very hard to storytell that. So yes, there will be a point where you might hit critical mass because your incremental advances are so much better than everybody else that you eventually become 40% better than everybody else. So many founders, I think, make sometimes the mistake of reinventing new narratives and new product and pivoting too fast, always trying to be first to market. But the problem is that there's always somebody else there. There are very few places that you can be first. And like you mentioned before, Calvin, sometimes if you're first, you're dangerously early, which means that there is no adoption. So now your messaging have to be about educating people of what are you building because they don't even understand. So why I wanted you guys here is because you guys are a mixture of these hardcore builders. You have found that product market fit, fighting through the years, not really letting yourself be pushed down, but also reinventing the product itself to be able to solve those incremental problems and see that you didn't have to create a whole new narrative. You just got so much better until like, okay, fuck, these guys are like, now it's working, you know?
Yeah, and
One
I
more
really
question.
like
Yes, go ahead. Yeah, go
I
ahead.
really like the story that Tristan mentioned about the turning a non-Solana believer into somebody that was very impressed with the user experience. I think maybe this is also my approach towards thinking about stuff, but I do think sometimes my mistake in the early days was I built for the haters too. I wanted to do something to the point where I can prove if the hardest guy in the room to convince likes my burger, as with the burger analogy earlier, then everyone will love my burger. And I think that logic might exist, but it's not super practical. And I think going after the lower hanging fruit of some of the users that are already in the community that are clamoring for X or asking you to add Y, that feedback loop is probably the much more gratifying one to be able to help solve the existing users that already are asking you to add these features, right?
I like what you're saying. I do build some things for the haters, but I call it the basic package. Then I call it the premium package, and then I call it the haters package, you know? Like I really have to have the product funded on the basic package, the basic premise of why are we here and what is the problem that we're trying to solve. Then I do the other part, which is if I do this successfully, this will open me up to this new target audience or this new demographic or this product, you know, that I can spin from here. Like think about Binance as an exchange, and they started import perps, then they brought a launchpad, they brought all these, a marketplace. Now, well, your basic package is exactly the same one, but now you are creating new entry doors into your ecosystem by new products. We have one more question, and then we're gonna wrap it up. Nine, would you like to join again and ask the second question, please?
Oh yeah, sure. So which one would you like me to ask?
The one that unconventional tactics to find product market fit. Well, if I ask you
right.
this, you can try with your amazing voice. It will be better.
Thank you, man. Thank you. So yeah, I'm just wondering, like, because you guys, like both Tristan's and also Calvin, also yourselves, come from different angles and different sectors of like crypto in general, right? So just curious on like, what's your favorite unconventional like strategy, tactics, or insight you've seen to achieve product market fit or to achieve, like, for example, like the first 1,000 users either executed by your own project or another project you've seen which you really like. Thank you.
And maybe I'll start. I actually really think that Mad Lad's thought process around convincing people to get excited about just the greater Solana community as well as the NFT side of things and more technical problems that behind the scenes are there. I think that was actually very unconventional. I actually think some of the stuff that Friendtech and Blast, while I think a lot of people like to hate on it, I have to say, at least I don't have a blockchain that has 800, 900 million deposited into it. So I think some of the times, I think the strategies that you've already seen or know and in your own research, in some way, these things, if they get hate, they actually sometimes are hated because they have been done that are so obvious, but we didn't pull it off ourselves. And I think that's actually something that I would also measure on the flip side of the unconventional point. I would say I actually am not so worried about the unconventional or not, but also, are these tactics something that are novel versus already kind of copy pasted maybe too much? And I think you asked the question about the points part that I wanted to tie into this as well. That I see a lot of people build points. Or I think Jay, in our first conversation we met, we talked about giving users like the satisfaction of just opening the app and building the addiction to trying to try some of these products, right? Just by giving them a nice little dopamine hit of saying, hey, welcome bonus, you get, a free spin on a wheel or something like this, right? To kickstart some of the feedback loop of this user really loving your product. I do think a lot of this isn't actually about the unconventional part. I think the unconventional part is actually related to my point about building for haters. In some way, it doesn't matter if it's been overdone, if it gets the effect of what you're doing. Because as a founder, I think you should also be able to find other places where you innovate. Not necessarily every aspect needs to be 700% innovation on every single, step that you do in the everyday life, right? So I actually think after trying a lot of things, sticking with the simplest types of approaches to getting some sort of product market fit may actually be the most useful things. And then, as we've talked a lot about during this session, storytelling, I think, is actually really important to tell the wins after you've actually tried some strategy, that you actually can own the story around that strategy afterwards.
Great answer. Tristan, your turn.
Yeah, my take, I think this, I learned this from, there was a really good podcast by Reid Hoffman when he interviewed Brian Chesky, for founder of Airbnb. And it was all about providing 6-star experiences, essentially. In the early days, you can kind of afford to do these non-scalable things because you have no traction, no users, and you just need to prove out an idea. And so a great way to do that is, I remember we would just go on Twitter, we would post stuff, or I would just go DM a bunch of people that I kind of followed on Twitter, and I would just be like, hey, we got this new product, we'd love if you could kind of check it out. And usually people, for the most part, will actually respond to you and kind of want to help you, unless obviously they're a very, very big account. And so it's good, just literally just like DMing 20 people, maybe 10 of them actually get back to you, try the platform, and you already get some like very quick feedback, I guess, from those people. And having that personal connection, I think, with the person also helps a lot. And you can afford to do that, right? You've only got 10 kind of relationships to manage. It's very easy. You can talk to the dude one-on-one in DMs. You can get on a call with him, stuff like that. I would say most people are pretty willing to kind of share their time and help out fellow people. So that worked really well. And then past that, doing what Calvin said, or like incentives or kind of these like short-term campaigns worked a lot for us. We actually ran one with Evgeny back in the day. We did like a little trading comp where we said, Evgeny will trade on the Zeta Markets platform. Obviously, he's from Wintermute. He's like a big trader. And we said that if you can beat him on the Zeta leaderboard, we'll airdrop you this NFT essentially. And a ton of people came in. They're like, I'm going to beat Evgeny. I want to be a better trader than him or something or other. So we got like a couple of hundred people in there trying to trade. And I think Evgeny probably put on a bit too much leverage, got liquidated. So most people got their NFTs, but it was kind of like a fun thing, I think. So yeah, it was good.
Well, I think this is a great way of ending the panel. I am extremely grateful for all of you guys to join. Calvin, you have an amazing take on life and on companies, and I'm very happy that you're able to be here with me. Zeta, Tristan, your recent uptick in your company is totally deserved, and we're really looking forward to see what's coming next or in the next future. And yes, thank you everybody for being here. We are going to move on to these one-on-ones and the gathering part, which is actually a really cool part of this bootcamp. Calvin and Tristan, if you guys want to stay, you're more than welcome. What happens now is we are provided a new link, and we go there, and now we get to talk to the people that are attending this event. Luke or Steven, if you want to jump in.
Yeah, I posted the link in the chat, so we'll see you guys there.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Cheers.